Now, my name is Valerie Hope, and I'm the marketing manager of the BW Credit Union. And it is my pleasure to be your MC for tonight's session. Now, before we officially get going, just wanted to just share a little housekeeping with you. If you haven't noticed, we are actually recording this webinar. And what we're going to do after today's session is we were going to share the recording. So that allows you to go back and, if you missed any, kind of pertinent details, gives you an opportunity just to rewatch the session. And we're also going to share an evaluation form, which I ask that you kindly complete. We're hoping to collect information as we continue to do these sessions so that we can get your feedback and input in terms of how we can improve them. And certainly in terms of getting some ideas of what future sessions or topics that we should certainly look to bring in the future, because we're looking to hold these sessions at least once a month. Now, I'm going to ask that you remain muted during the presentations so that we can minimize disruptions. And I'm also going to ask that you hold your questions to the end of the presentation unless otherwise engaged by our presenters. During the question and answer section, which we're going to have at the end, if you have a question or you want to make a comment, please kindly raise your hand, and we are going to call on you to unmute and speak. If you're a little shyer and you don't want to speak, feel free to pose your questions in the Zoom chat. And our team here with me, we are going to take a look and pose those questions to our presenter. Finally, last thing I want to share with you is I want you to pay close attention to everything we're going to share this evening, because we're going to have a very short quiz at the end of the evening, and 2 lucky persons will get a chance to win a $50 credit union cash voucher from the BW Cooperative Credit Union. Now, I can't help it. I'm in marketing. So whenever I'm in front of a new audience, I don't like to assume that you know who we are. So very quickly, let me share some quick details about the BW Cooperative Credit Union. With almost 30,000 members and just under $200 million in assets and growing, we are one of the largest member-owned financial institutions in Barbados, and we have been in operation since 1983. Our credit union offers a full range of financial products and services, and we presently have 3 convenient branches in Bridgetown, Whitestown, and Oistins. Now, on July 8th of this year, we are going to be celebrating, a really kind of great milestone. We're going to be celebrating our 40th anniversary. And therefore, we've been working on some exciting initiatives throughout this year. And I encourage you to stay tuned to our various channels so that you can get these updates accordingly. Now is time for what I know you've all come here for. Today, we will be exploring the topic, the ins and outs of investing in renewable energy. Now, as you may be aware, Barbados is striving to achieve the goal of becoming a 100% renewable energy and carbon neutral island by 2030. Not very far from here, another 10, just under 10 years. So in advancement of this transformational goal, and with the continued development of a green economy, there are new investment opportunities springing up. And we want to ensure that we can provide both our current and our prospective members with exposure to various options, which can help generate new channels of revenue, reduce living expenses, and allow for more sustainable lifestyle. Additionally, considering the recent Fair Trading Commission decision regarding the Barbados Light and Power rate review application, we felt it was important to bring a renowned expert in both these areas to share insights with you and give you a greater perspective. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, it is my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Trevor Browne. Now, he is a retired professional electrical engineer with nearly 40 years in the electric utility. In the Cooperative Movement, he was the founding president of Ready Kilowatt Co-op Light and Power's Employees Credit Union and Cooperatives General Insurance Company Limited. He has also served as president of the Barbados Co-op League. Brother Browne was also a senior officer at the Barbados Defense Force, retiring at the rank of lieutenant colonel. He also served as commandant of the Barbados Cadet Corps from 2004 to 2014. Being the versatile gentleman that he is, the lieutenant colonel has also held leading roles in the sport of table tennis and was a director of the Barbados Olympic Association from 2004 to 2016. He holds a master's degree in management from the University of Lyon, France, and was awarded the Barbados Silver Crown of Merit in 2006 and the Caribbean Cadet Medal for his work with Caribbean youth. He is currently serving as president of the Barbados Sustainable Energy Cooperative Society Limited and the Barbados Association of Professional Engineers. He's a chairman of the Council of Caribbean Engineering Organizations, deputy chairman of the board of the Barbados National Standards Institute, and a member of the Planning and Development Committee. He's chairman of the Coalition of Cooperatives, and most importantly, one of the interveners in the previously held Barbados Light and Power Company rate hearings. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Colonel Trevor Browne.
Thank you very, very much, Valerie. Can I go ahead and share my screen, please?
Yes, you can, please.
And I am hoping that it is up and running.
I can see it clearly.
Okay, great. So let me wish a good evening to everyone here. First, of course, I want to thank you, Val, and your team for giving me this opportunity, me and Co-op Energy, to interact with members of the Barbados Workers Union Credit Union on the important subject of investing in renewable energy. Of course, I have to say a special thank you to the board of your credit union for their unwavering encouragement and support for Co-op Energy from the very introduction of the concept of Co-op Energy back in 2019. And of course, a special thanks to all of you who have joined this afternoon, who have taken the trouble to join this session. And this is especially important, we think, at Co-op Energy, as it gives us the opportunity to provide an update on what we've been up to for the last 3 years, but also, probably even more importantly, a chance to listen to your feedback and to benefit from any guidance that you have as we go forward with this effort that we've undertaken. So this evening, I wish to cover the fairly complex question of investing in energy in Barbados in the coming energy transformation that is planned for Barbados. Forgive me if I take pains to explain some of the background issues, because it is my hope that these will help you to understand why there is, in fact, a bit of confusion in the Barbados energy market today, and how Co-op Energy sees itself playing a role in eliminating that confusion. So in about 45 to 50 minutes, I propose to attempt to do the following. Explain for you the background to our current situation in Barbados, and globally to some extent. Explain why investing in energy is not only important, but it is actually imperative. It is not something we can ignore. I want to explain and give an outline of the various challenges that investors will face in energy. But at the same time, I want to explain how, and particularly through the cooperative movement, we have been able to take steps to protect that investment of members who do decide to invest in energy, to make sure that your investment is safe and sound and wise. And of course, at the end, I will take the opportunity to give you an update on the current rate case, because I know everyone is interested in that, which is still ongoing. So I'll give you an idea certainly from our perspective in the cooperative movement and as interveners representing the movement, how we see the situation at present. My expectation is that this will leave about an hour or so for questions, feedback, discussion. And as I said, we are particularly interested in hearing from you what you would like to see the movement do, so that as representatives in the hearing, for example, and at Co-op Energy, we can be properly guided. So if we can get started, essentially, I'm going to try to go through these 10 steps, and I'll try to do it in order, but if you know me, I tend to wave and wonder, and so, but generally speaking, I will try to follow this. So first of all, I think it is very important that we understand the language we're talking. So I'm going to spend a minute or two talking about what energy is. When we talk about energy, what do we mean? And when I do that, I want, at the end of that short session, if you don't understand that this is the most critical issue facing Barbados and probably the world, I would not have done a good job. First step, what is energy? Why it is critical? I want to look at the challenges that we are facing globally and what we mean by renewable energy and why it is so important. And then we can zero in on the Barbados situation, the special situation in Barbados. And I want to talk a little bit about what we call the Barbados National Energy Policy, which is a creative, innovative policy set by the government of Barbados that is nowhere else in the world has something at that level of thinking. It is interesting. I want to talk a little bit about that. And then I want to talk about the requirements for making that successful. So I'm going to look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that that policy presents and how it impacts on the credit union movement. So then we can talk about the case for investing in energy. Once you understand those things, I'm hoping then that it becomes clear to everyone where we all need to be interested and wherever possible to invest in energy. The challenges should become clear by that point. The role of the cooperatives and why we created co-op energy. If that is not clear by 8, I'm going to start back at 4 and go again. So try and make sure that that is clear. And then, of course, I'm going to give a brief on the rate hearing, where we are now, the path forward, and then we can have our discussion and I will answer any additional questions that you have. But I'm going to try in my session to cover as much of what we think with your questions as possible. So what is energy? In short, it is probably the most basic and fundamental of all the physical, scientific, and probably even spiritual concepts that you can imagine. Normally, when we talk about energy, we talk about the ability to do work. So, we know that energy is indispensable to do anything, whether it's working, getting things hot or cool, or making lights shine, or even thinking. It all requires energy. But did you know that over and above that, energy is also interchangeable with everything that exists? Everything that you know that comprises this world is really energy, existing in different forms. So there's heat, there's light, there's work, there's stones, there's iron, there are buildings. In the final analysis, all is the same identical energy. So you may have heard about Albert Einstein. And he is one of the fellows who think about these things and try to make sense of it. And he came up with this familiar equation, E equals mc squared, which essentially says that energy, the fundamental thing in this universe is energy. Everything that you see is different forms of energy. I want to put it to you that what this really means is that you can't think of anything more important. When we talk about essentials, we tend to think about water and food and all that. Without energy, we can't even get water. You can't even manage to eat the food. Energy is fundamental. Energy exists in many different forms, as you know. So we have heat and light and motion. I said that before. It is everything that exists. If you have the opportunity to invest in a concept that is essentially everything that we know, that we cannot do without, it actually goes without saying that this is going to be a sound investment. There is no way that Barbados or anywhere in the world can survive without access to energy. So the very first law of science explains that energy is an entity that cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. So basically what science says is that at the beginning of time, there was a certain amount of energy in this world, and until the end of time, that same identical amount of energy will exist. It changes from form to form. It changes from heat to light to work to things to back to energy, but the total amount is the same. In the true sense of the word, therefore, there can be no such thing as renewable energy. Energy was there at the beginning of time, and it is going to be there at the end of time. So when we talk about renewable energy, I want to give you an idea of what we're talking about and why it is important. So let me look at this next slide. There's a second law in science that deals with the concept called entropy. Now, entropy is something like life. You certainly know that when you're born, children tend to be full of energy. Children, they don't get tired. They don't seem to, well, when they get sleepy, they really sleep. But when they're active, they're really active. And we know that the older you get, the less you're able to get out of the energy that you consume. That concept is called entropy. As you age, the ability to convert energy into work decreases. Now, if you look at that graph, basically what that is saying is the line at the top is the amount of energy in existence. It's a solid straight line. The red line is this thing we call entropy. And this, by the way, this is the second law of science. This is science. I'm not making this up. And that bluish line is that devilish thing called entropy, which as time goes by, erodes the efficiency of energy. Now, what that means is that as this world gets older and older, we're able to get less and less work out of the energy that we use. When we talk about renewable, what has happened and what scientists have been able to demonstrate in the last 20 or 30 years is that because of the pace of development of our world, we seem to be, well, they call it global warming. We seem to be accelerating this concept called entropy. And things are getting more chaotic faster than we had anticipated. When we talk about renewable energy, therefore, what we are talking about is finding ways to use the kinds of energy that is not going to accelerate the degradation that is natural in the world. So whether you eat well or live your life as healthily as possible, eventually, I mean, you're going to get old and die. But the time that is going to take to do that can be controlled if you do the right things. And by renewable energy, what we're talking about is this world moving to do the right things. We went through a phase where we kind of ate as we like. We ate all the wrong things and we didn't sleep at night, and that has put us in the dangerous position. So renewable energy is about doing things in a way that is going to extend the energy available to us in this world. I put a graph up just to show you, this is just England. And this graph shows you how the amount of energy that was used in the last 100 years in England. So if you look at every 10 years, you can see the total energy being used per year and the growth. So we moved from 1920, from about 0 per year to 2010, where it is almost 400,000 million megawatts. And we're just talking about England. And this is just the last 100 years. We have been using energy power at a phenomenal rate to drive human development. Look at that graph over the last 800 years. We had a world that for the last, and it actually goes way beyond that. So I can say from the beginning of the world until about 100 years ago, look and see how much electricity, how much energy, how much fuel we were converting into electricity. Now, this is just England. Almost none. In the last 100 years, we have taken that from 0 up to 400,000 million, enough, 400 with 9 zeros behind it. By renewable energy now, what we're talking about, how can we enjoy electrical power? Because we want to continue to sustain development, but we don't want to do it without disrupting the natural systems that result in a climate that we can live in. So look, if you could imagine the world settling down to what happened in all those years before 1900, and then the world having to adjust to what we have done between 1900 and now, and what we continue to do, we have put extreme stress on the world, which is why you're seeing the kind of extreme weather systems that we're seeing now. We have to do something about it. So I say all this to say why this whole energy transformation that we have adopted in Barbados is critically important, not just for Barbados, but for the world. And just to show you how dire the situation is, I was talking about England just now. This is the global situation over the last same 100 years or so. And the units here, instead of 10 and 9 zeros behind it, this is the global use of energy. It is 10 and 18 zeros behind it. So in the last 100 years, we have been using energy. Those units are called exajoules. So if you could picture a number with that is, well, that's about 540 of them. And each one of those is a 1 and 18 zeros. And that is how much we're using per year that we never used to use before 1900. The world is in a challenging position. The chart, if I were to put the chart I showed you for England on this, it wouldn't even make a difference. So what are the global energy challenges? The first challenge is that we have, in the last 100 years, built a world that is addicted to electrical energy. We cannot do without it. Barbados will not be Barbados without electricity. So understand that there's no going back. We are totally, completely addicted, and it's not just Barbados, the world is addicted. At the same time, because of what they're calling global warming and climate change, some things have been happening to our climate and to our world, as you have seen from the storm systems, the tornadoes, the floods, the earthquakes. That is unprecedented, and we cannot continue. If we continue along that, we can have other serious problems. Over and above that, the price of fossil fuels that we've been using to produce this electricity have gone overboard. And then the foreign exchange for places like Barbados, the money that we have to find in foreign exchange to pay for that fuel, we actually buy. Last year, in 2022, we spent over $1 billion in foreign exchange to buy fuel, which we promptly burnt to produce heat, to produce electricity. That is a lot of money to burn. But we are addicted to it. We cannot do without it. We need the energy. In Barbados, the problem is clear and specific. High costs, pressure on foreign exchange. We also have environmental pollution from the use of these fuels. The actual cost of electricity, even to customers, I think you know, and the whole point of this rate case that we'll talk a little bit about, that is also a high cost that needs to be addressed. At the same time, there are other costs that you may not even be aware of, the aging infrastructure. We are in a situation now where most of the plant that produce electricity for us needs to be replaced. Do you replace it with the old plant that we know about, or do you replace it with the new plant that is going to be renewable? Those are the kind of decisions that need to be made. And the biggest problem of all is that there's nowhere in this world where there's any models exist of the transformation that we have to undergo. So we can't go and look at Belize, for example, or Jamaica or Egypt and say, well, you had the same problem. Let's see what you do, what you did, and we will do the same thing. We're going to have to do this from scratch. The interesting thing about Barbados, which I want to talk about for a minute or two now, is that our government came up with an interesting answer. It is called the Barbados National Energy Policy, and it's supposed to run, it was slated to run from 2019 to 2030. Now, this is a really interesting book. This is a picture of the book over on the right. And you can download it from the Ministry of Energy's website. Really interesting reading. It's long. You can do that, or you can take my word for it. That book says 4 things, which I'm going to tell you now. The first thing the policy says is that the government of Barbados has adopted a policy where we are going to set a target of moving to 100% carbon-free energy production in Barbados. They said that because it is technologically possible. Because of PV panels and modern windmills and biofuel systems, it actually is technically possible to do that. And the government has taken the brave and I think innovative decision to set that as the #1 target. We are going to do it fully correctly. The next one is that they could have said we will do it by 2050, which is what most other countries have done, 2060, 2045. Government said, this is a small country. We want to be a good role model for the rest of the world, and especially for small countries, we want to do it aggressively. And they said 2030. 2030, 2035 is neither here nor there. The point of that policy is that we are going to tackle this aggressively. To me, as a credit union member, the most innovative part of that Barbados National Energy Policy is what I identify as the 3rd policy. What they decided is that in this transformation, there shall be, not may, not should, there shall be meaningful local participation in the new energy market. Now we will talk about that a little bit because that's a brilliant statement. And that is what galvanized the credit union movement at the time, where Harry Haynes was the president of the league, and like the president of your credit union, they all got together at some sessions, and this is what galvanized us to get involved. And the last one that the last major policy that that I extracted from this document is that in making this change, the government didn't want to be dictatorial. They didn't want to come and take away anything from anybody. They didn't want to come and unfair anybody. what they wanted to do it in a fair way that allows all the current people who operate in the market to continue to be fully included in as fair a manner as possible. In those 4 statements, I have summarized for you the Barbados National Energy Policy. This is a global, there's nowhere else in the world with something as aggressively innovative and creative as that, as you will see as we go through a little bit further. What I did was to take the 10 leading countries in the world that have set aggressive targets for conversion to renewable energy. And I added Barbados as number 10 because we have set 100%. But I want you to take a careful look at the other 9 who are in this league. In every case, these are countries that are well advanced in already using renewable energy because they're lucky to have the resources to do it. So if you look over on the note on the right, you'll see that Sweden has hydroelectric power, which means they have rivers and dams and they can use that. They also have biofuels. Costa Rica actually export renewable energy. They're so blessed with hydroelectric power and things like that. Scotland is well known for very attractive wind systems and wind and water and all that. So most of these countries, in Iceland is interesting. They actually use the thermal heat under the ground that cause earthquakes. I mean the volcanoes and that kind of thing. But they can keep that. But the point is, they are able to extract their power from thermal energy. Now look at Barbados. In comparison, we are at about 9% of our electricity is renewable at present. And we are aiming to get the other 91% by 2030. Compare that with anybody else, and you will see the magnitude of the challenge that the Barbados government is seeking to undertake. Now, I want to put it to you, and I've actually said this as president of the Engineers Association. This conversion is actually technically achievable. It can be done. However, if we were to get this to work, it would be the most radical, complex, and I would say dangerous undertaking that we have ever done in Barbados. It would be like our equivalent of the US in 1961 taking the decision to send a man to the moon and bring it back, and then to get turned around and doing it. But the problem is, and I think this is what the Barbados government decided when they came with this policy. We have no choice because the alternative is even worse. The old fossil system is not sustainable. Now, just for everybody's benefit, let me give you just an idea of the kind of change we're actually talking about. This is a basic block diagram of what we actually have now. This works pretty well. I mean, we've had this for 120 years. This thing is almost 100% reliable. It is so because there are some really outstandingly talented people who actually work in the power company, who actually make this work. But I don't care how talented they are, this is becoming obsolete because of the cost of fuel, because of the kind of equipment, and because of what it is doing to the environment. The way this works is that we import fuel, as you can see in ships. We store it at the Barbados National Oil Company Limited. So we have storage so that we know we have maybe a couple of months or a couple of weeks storage. That fuel is then delivered to the generators at Spring Garden, changed into electricity and put into the grid, and arrives at the home of customers in the form of on-demand power. So that when you turn on the switch or you plug in your fridge, no question, everything is going to work. What we're trying to change that to is something like this. A smart grid that allows energy to come in from all different kinds of energy to come in from all kinds of different areas. This energy includes intermittent solar type energy, the PV type systems, wind energy from windmills and offshore wind and things like that, biofuels and waste energy, hydrogen, those types of energy, all going to the smart grid and delivered to the customer's home. Now, the problem is, because you as a customer want your energy on demand, you want it when you want it, there needs to be some form of storage so that when you say you want it, it is there available to you. Also, if the sun isn't shining or the wind decides not to blow, there's something in storage that can still keep the system working. We haven't come across any people yet who are willing to say that they're happy with this change, but too bad if there's no wind. We will do for electricity for a couple of days till the wind comes back. No, we haven't found anybody who said that. So there's going to be a need for systems to make that work. So here is what we're looking at doing. changing from what is on the top to what is on the bottom. There's only one word to describe that kind of change: radical. And that is a conservative word to use. This is a drastic change. There's nothing in the old system that actually translates smoothly into the new system. The only thing that is common, in fact, is the customer and the customer requirements. What this means is that doing this transformation is going to require detailed planning, intricate thought. It cannot be done over a long period, because the reason we're getting rid of the old system is because it's too expensive. The new system is also very expensive. And if we can't afford one, we really can't afford to run two together. So the trick here is to do all your planning, and then in as short a time frame as possible, transform from the top old system to the new system that we need to be using at the bottom. It is a radical change. Let me reemphasize, it is doable, but it is not going to happen automatically because somebody wants it to happen. It has to be planned in detail, executed with intricate expertise, tested, planned and retried, and then be sure to make it work the first time. There's no room to play around and make sport and then try it again if it don't work out. So in summary, I hope you have an idea of what the Barbados National Energy Policy is, what we are trying to do in Barbados, what the government have actually adopted this policy. This is what Barbados is on the path of doing. The goals are real, they're imaginative, they are bold, and I mean bold by global standards. I don't mean bold by Caribbean standards or by Barbados standards. Globally, these are bold goals. But I want to emphasize that they are disruptive and that this is not something that can be done incrementally. This is not going to work by saying 2% and then 4% and then 10% and then 15%. There's a window, maybe up to about 10 or 12% that you can do that. And then there's a window between maybe 90 and 100%, where it can be the other way around, where you will mostly be renewable and a little bit of fossil. But there's no room for this kind of transformation to move smoothly between the two, because we physically can't afford it. We don't have the place in Barbados to run the two systems. And we definitely can't afford to keep on buying fuel while we're also buying renewable equipment. So it's a really, really, really interesting challenge that we have taken on in Barbados. And I want you to know, when I say we have taken it on, I don't mean that the government has taken it on. I don't mean that the engineers have taken it on, or that the FTC has taken it on. Barbados has taken this on. And whether it works or not is going to impact on every single person that lives in Barbados, that visits Barbados, that passes through Barbados. So this is our challenge. So the way forward, what I'm suggesting to you is that this thing can be done. It is complex, it is disruptive, it is expensive, but it is important, because the alternative is to keep on doing what we're doing, and eventually we can get a category 6 or 7, because again, still have to upgrade it, and everything is going to go back now, because we cannot continue disrupting the climate and expecting to live like we did 100 years ago when we didn't do those kind of disruption. The plan, this thing needs to be planned. This is what I've been calling for as president of the AP. This is what we've been calling for at Co-op Energy. We like this thing. We understand we need to do it. We want it planned in detail, and the plan shared with all Barbadians, and all Barbadians understand that we are all in this together, because if it works, it's going to be great for everybody. If it don't work, it is going to be not great for anybody. We are saying that the plan needs to detail engineering, architectural. We need to know what it's going to look like, and not after it is finished, after people put things wherever they feel like. We need to, every Barbadian should be able to see a plan and say, look, when this thing is done, here is how Barbados is going to look. That's what architects do. And we have some brilliant architects in Barbados who can actually do that. We need an engineering plan. We have engineers who can actually plan this on a computer, so that you can actually work the system on the computer and see what is going to work, what's going to happen when the rain falls, before putting a block in the road. And we can tell, yes, this is going to work, but you have to change that. That is going to be a problem if we get a storm. This is not going to work if we have 2 days before rain. And we can make the adjustment before we waste any money. Once that plan is detailed and checked, and then the financial people check it to see, yes, this makes sense, we can afford to buy that equipment and we will make a profit, and people can afford to pay for the electricity. When that is all done, then we can do the implementation. That is how complex engineering projects are undertaken. That's how people went to the moon. Experts sat down and planned again, double check, and then they built it and work. I'm saying that if we in Barbados are incapable of creating such a professional plan, then the truth is that we have no business even trying this complex transformation. It is too important. The other thing, just before you go on to this thing, the other thing I want to say is that this is not important only for Barbados. What the interesting thing about this Barbados National Energy Policy is that if and when we get it to work, this is going to be transformational for Barbados. Because what you will have is a situation where other people can look and see, well, let us see what you did so that we can do it. Now, if you know the value in that kind of being in that position to Barbados, you cannot imagine. That is worth more than gold to be seen as a prototype that people can come to, especially small islands that may not have the resources or the luck. I'm talking about luck. Let's look at the SWOT, the strengths, for example. Why I think the government's move to implement that policy is brilliant and why it can work. Barbados have a climate, see, and a geography. By geography, I mean a location in this world, in the Atlantic, that is the envy of many. From a climate point of view, if you're talking about renewable energy, it is close to perfect. Close to perfect. From a geography point of view, if you look at the history of storms and earthquakes and bad events and compare Barbados with almost anybody else, you have to admit that Barbados is ideally placed to be the prototype for something like this. In terms of topography, and by topography I mean the kind of landscape that we have. Even in the Caribbean, the challenges that some of those countries have with mountains and rivers and Barbados, any place is accessible. The worst thing, the biggest hill we have is Mount Hilby, and you only know is that because we call it Mount Hilby. If you didn't name it Mount Hilby, you probably would think it's just another part of Barbados. Barbados is blessed with the existing infrastructure. Almost 100% already covered with much of what you will need, certainly from the customer end of developing the new smart grid. We have been blessed with a cadre of technical and professional expertise that can actually get this going, not only in engineering and architecture and in finance and accounting, but even if you look in the cooperative movement, and you see the number of outstanding leaders that are available to make things work. What we need is the opportunity for those people to actually demonstrate the leadership as they have done in the credit union movement, by the way. But this is another blessing that we have. But one thing I want to touch briefly on this, and forgive me if I spend 2 minutes talking on this, because I think this is key to the success of everything. This thing is not going to work with a whole bunch of different people running around doing different things. In the last 100 years, the reason why electric utilities have been outstandingly successful is because the way that these utilities have been structured is what is called a public utility. So these are structures that are created by a country, belong to the country, and they are given a monopoly. The reason they're given a monopoly is so that they can enjoy economies of scale. So when you do something, everybody is in it together. You represent everybody together. You have the opportunity to have a singular professional approach to planning and execution. You don't have to waste time trying to argue. The arguments happen inside the organization. They can fight as much as they like in there, but when they decide, they come out and make it work. And there are clear lines of responsibility. If it don't work, we know who to hang. When you have all sorts of different people playing the game and things don't work, you have to spend weeks trying to decide who is to blame. And it takes months and sometimes years to decide that. When there's a single responsibility, you don't have that problem, you know exactly who to blame. So you'll find that things miraculously tend not to go wrong. And as I said, there's prompt and consistent decision-making. Point I want to make here, right, is that having a real electric utility operating like an electric utility is central to making something as complicated as this work successfully in Barbados. We had an outstanding electric utility before 2011. I will talk about what happened after 2011 shortly. In terms of the way forward, there are weaknesses. And as I said, this coming out to the strength, biggest weakness is the problem with the strength. Our utility since 2011 is no longer a public utility because it is now privately owned. And obviously, as it is privately owned, it behaves like a privately owned institution. That is a problem. It is a problem for us in Co-op Energy. And it is one of the concerns that we have coming out of the rate case that I will talk a little bit about. Even coming out of that, we actually maintain that even things like the upkeep of infrastructure and the development of local technical expertise, making sure there are people here to keep this thing working 5, 10, 15, 20 years, who are seeing it from a Barbados perspective. That has fallen apart. As a result of this change, what we've seen is that government has been forced to introduce competition in the market. We are calling them IPPs, independent power producers. So in addition to the utility, you now have independent persons who, instead of investing in the utility and getting their returns that way, and then having one entity representing everyone in Barbados, you now have people competing to produce electricity. So you have the utility and you have independent power producers. In our opinion, this is going to cause, and it has, I think we all know that, long fights over things like rates, over feed-in tariffs, over PPAs, power purchase agreements, over licenses. And when I say long, I mean going on for years, simple things that should be decided in a week or two. Nothing gets done. And if you just think about the rate case, the rate case started in 2011. This is 2023, and it is ongoing. Back and forth actions by the FTC, who is now in a very, very complicated position, trying to resolve this bickering between different groups. This is all caused because we've introduced competition in the market, and the competition had to be introduced by government because the utility is no longer playing the role for which it was actually created. And by the way, which the law still recognizes it as needing to play. In terms of opportunities, if we were to sort out that utility back to its rightful role, that is going to be a key driver for success. If we can ensure that all energy stakeholders are included, which is a central policy in the government's national energy policy, a brilliant policy that needs to be put in place on the ground. The fact of the matter is that the utility belongs to Barbados. It still does. In fact, I don't know if you all know this, but the way it works is that it is actually leased as a franchise to people who operate it. And there is a present lease which actually expires in 2028, just 2 or 3 years down the road. When that lease expires, the government of Barbados will be required to reissue a new lease to new franchise holders. We in Co-op Energy see this as an excellent opportunity, talking about opportunities, for this restructuring that is necessary, and to put Barbados on track to make our Barbados national energy policy work. Now, talking about opportunities, if we were to get Barbados to become a global model for this kind of transformation from fossil fuel to sustainable energy, this would be a game changer for Barbados. It puts Barbados ahead. I mean, I don't even want to talk about it. But to do that, we need a fit-for-purpose utility. We need to democratize the benefits. Let me say a little bit about that. If you're going to be moving to a situation where you're going to be extracting raw energy from the environment around Barbados, you're going to be having windmills, you're going to be having PV panels, you're going to be having bioplants all over the place. In my backyard, next door to me, it is important that when I look at a windmill, what I see is something that is generating some income for me. If it's generating income for people that I don't know and don't know me, it's not difficult to see the psychological different reaction I'm going to have to that. I think government recognizes that. And therefore, it is important as a matter of getting this to work for the new system to be enfranchised, to be democratic. And as I said before, for there to be a professional strategic planning, design, and engineering approach. If successful, this is going to change everything in Barbados. We see the way forward as critical. The threats are frightening. Failure to do something is not an option because the old fossil system is not sustainable. And if you doubt me, I invite you to, when you finish the session, to go and Google And this what is happening in South Africa now with respect to their energy situation. It is a mess. Australia, Spain, there are numerous examples of even large countries whose failure to plan properly has resulted in chaos in their energy market. And these are people that could afford it. And in those countries, they operate not isolated like Barbados. When Spain collapsed and they messed up their system, they were able to just use interconnections, and they got power from England and Germany and France. And people were able to continue. It cost them a little bit more, but big deal. In Barbados, if we collapse, there's no interconnection. Failure is not an option for us. The old system is not sustainable. The planned transition is complex, but we can do it. Our biggest challenge is doing it collectively as one through a well-organized utility, and doing it by proper planning and execution. From an individual perspective now, and this is where the cooperative come in. When we sat in the meetings organized by the Ministry for Stakeholders, they invited the credit union and the cooperative movement to be involved. And what we saw was a situation where large numbers of individual Barbadians are now part of this complicated transformation, but not in a position to influence anything. We were seeing big players coming in talking about hundreds of millions of dollars investment. And ordinary Barbadians did not even know what was going on. And the leaders of the movement at that time undertook to create the co-op energy, to lead the charge of the cooperative movement to represent the interests of ordinary Barbadians. Because as I said, if this is successful, it's going to be great for all Barbadians. If it's not, it's going to be not great for all Barbadians. So we are in it together. And the reason why the movement, this is the credit unions, the Barbados Cooperative Business Association, all of them collectively got together and took this decision to create co-op energy to represent the overall movement, so that as a body, we can have some influence. And if you look at what's happening with the rate case, you can see that maybe we're now learning and we're now starting, but we've actually started to do that. Whenever I do this presentation, and I've had a chance to do it to a number of credit unions before, people ask me, are there any examples where people have actually converted something like an island from fossil fuel to electric? And the answer is yes. It's not exactly on the same scale as Barbados, but I'm just going to put this up so that you can just go and Google it, and you can read to your heart. There's lots and lots of information. After the Paris Agreement, Denmark took a decision, just like I'm saying to you, that this thing is too important to make sport. And if you know how those Europeans operate, they went back home, called their top people together and said, this has to work. And the first thing they did was to do a pilot project. So they said, find a project, use that as a pilot project so we can see what works and don't work. And if it don't work, we can learn from that. And they have this island called SAMSO, SAMSOE, or SO. It's about the size of 2 Barbados parishes, just off Denmark. And they took a decision to use that as a prototype. Now, what I found really interesting about this is the way they went about it. They invited the proposals for how they will do it. So they did planning up front before they drove a stroke, before they did anything, they made a plan. They created an island-wide plan. Every single person on the island was involved. Most of them were involved by being encouraged to join cooperatives, a credit union or a co-op, who represented them. And through the co-op, they were part of the planning session. And the co-ops kept them up to date, kept them informed, and was part of the joint competent management team that did the transformation. This started in 1998, and by 2008, this place is now a mecca where anyone who's talking about this conversion, you catch a plane and you go and there's a museum, you walk around and see what they do, you talk to the people. This has become a global model of how you can do a conversion. But obviously it's not as complex as Barbados. It is a fairly small island. It was largely agriculture. This is not as complicated, no tourism and all that. We have the opportunity to do something far more realistic. But the fact is that this was done. It has been an outstanding success. And the central point is the role that cooperatives and togetherness played in making it work. So just to repeat briefly, the ingredients for success, as we say, is everybody on deck, a formal plan, understand that this is a radical change. We don't have the finance, the time, or the space to put two systems up and then take down the old one. We're gonna have to do that very, very quickly. A changeover. There must be clear overall decisive leadership at the national level, and that leadership must be Barbados focused. And lastly, and I'm sure as a member of a co-op who is interested in investing, it must make financial sense. People who invest must be able to see upfront that if I invest $1, I know what I'm going to get next year, the year after that, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. It cannot be a guessing thing where we'll take the money and then we'll see how things work out. That is done by planning. And we have the expertise. If we do the engineering plan, the financial people can do the financial assessment, and we can work out what the investment will be, what the return will be, even before we do the commitment. This is all doable. From Co-op Energy's point of view, I can tell you that, and because people ask, here is our proposal as to what needs to be done in Barbados. If we were running things, this is what would happen. We're suggesting that a new national energy authority needs to be created in Barbados. This national energy authority would then be given the franchise to operate the utility in Barbados. This franchise, which I call the NEA, would then belong to the shareholders would be, and I've outlined them below. And this is all in keeping with what the government said. They don't want to disenfranchise any current stakeholders. We're suggesting that America Caribbean Limited, who right now own 100% of Lightning Power, 40%. And the reason for that is that Lightning Power is actually currently about 40% of the electricity market in Barbados. If you understand the electricity market, about 60% is fuel, which is BNOCL and government, and 40% is what they do with transmission and generation and things like that. So they keep their 40%. The other 60%, we're suggesting represented by BAMC, because the future of renewable energy is actually with BAMC, with BNOCL, who traditionally held the storage license, with cooperatives. One of the biggest challenges we found to this, even if it's successful, is keeping it as a Barbadian entity. I challenge anybody to name a successful Barbadian entity in the last 50 years that is still Barbadian. Except, of course, Cooperative General Insurance, which, because it is owned by credit unions, will always be Barbadian. And we are suggesting that if we're going to put the effort of making this energy Barbadian, let us make sure that there are cooperatives in there to make sure it stays Barbadian. And also then the open market, so that anyone who wants to invest money in energy, because they see the importance, can invest in the National Energy Authority. And I don't know if you know this, but under the law of Barbados, that National Energy Authority is guaranteed a profit every year. So all investors in NEA can sit back and know that there will be a guaranteed profit while they're contributing to having sound, safe electricity. This new body, which then represents everybody in Barbados, could then develop the national plan. And this can be done. This is a 6-month thing. This don't need to take 100 years. This is in 3 to 6 months, we can actually develop that national plan, have it approved by and understood by all Barbadians and peer reviewed by the experts and all that, and then undertake the implementation. And I guarantee you that between 2030 and 2035, this could be a fait accompli, everything done properly. Why are cooperatives interested? I don't want to preach to the converted. You know that cooperatives have been the most impressively successful single entity in Barbados in the last 30 years. No question about it. But the cooperative movement now has assets in the region of $3 billion. But that isn't the assets. It is the people involved at senior management level who have been doing outstandingly successful jobs in representing the interests of ordinary Barbadians, who have gained the trust of hundreds of thousands of ordinary Barbadians. Cooperatives actually have resources that are needed if something like this is going to work. And the movement took the decision back in 2019 at those meetings to create Co-op Energy as a special vehicle to make this happen. And I will tell you why it was decided to do that rather than just get the credit unions to actually do it. We'll come to that shortly. The co-op model offers our best choice of maintaining ownership as Barbadian. Everything else has gone. You call it. Sol was the most recent case. Name them, BS&T, BNB, the same Light and Power. They're all now owned by not Barbadians. We did not think that it makes sense for us to put the effort, the investment, the trouble to make this complicated, important transformation work, and then have to go through the trauma of watching it being taken over by other persons. Where are we now? Co-op energy in the last 3-4 years, we have come very, very far. We actually have signed memorandums of agreement with a number of key international investors who are actually working on projects in Barbados. So we are definitely on the road to investing in this energy market because we've recognized that it's important. The people of Barbados must be represented. It is best done through cooperatives together, and we have taken a step to do that. We also have memorandum of understanding with a number of local state entities that are central to national development, including like BNOCL and definitely BAMC. We see BAMC as central to renewable energy going forward. Central. We have joint formal applications for key investments in national interests that are due to be divested, we expect shortly. We are looking at getting involved in this to have investment opportunities available for the cooperative movement so that they can properly invest their funds. We are aware that at present, large volumes of co-op funds and credit union funds are sitting in the banks at essentially 0% interest. This is not a sustainable situation. And the days are past when the movement is prepared to sit down and do nothing about that. And I will show you shortly what the leaders, the approach that they've taken and what we're looking to do. I can tell you now that as of now, as I speak, we at Co-op Energy are in a position to offer 3% plus whatever the banks are paying on interest on 5-year deposits by credit unions and cooperatives. And for deposits that are longer than 5-year terms, or 10-year terms, and these will be deposits like reserve funds, which you have to keep liquid anyway. We are prepared to pay, I'm not saying 4% plus whatever the normal system is paying. This is because Co-op Energy was created for the purpose of providing an opportunity for the movement to properly invest the funds that they hold on members' behalf. In the case where individuals may want to invest in Co-op Energy, we are offering 1.5% plus anything you can get in the market, over and above anything you can get in the market. The reason we do this is because the board of Co-op Energy has taken the decision that we actually want to encourage members, even members of Co-op Energy, to invest through their credit union. The credit union is able to advise you with the investments. This investment is not something that we've been doing for a long time in Barbados. It's new to many people. So rather than individuals come to Co-op Energy to try to, we have been encouraged, although it is possible to do that, we have done everything possible to encourage you to go and invest in the credit union, who then invest in Co-op Energy. So you'll see that we are offering extra incentives for credit unions to represent their members by investing in Co-op Energy. But that's something we can talk about some other time. The point is we are not here to compete with credit unions because Co-op Energy belongs to the credit unions. We are here because of the credit union. We have identified initial investment opportunities in the region of 200 million Barbados dollars that we can immediately be going with, that we expect in the short term to be good. We've already started on some projects. And the expectation is that we will generate returns in the order of 10%. I don't know if you know this, but if you look at the rate case, for example, the rate application, the utility is guaranteed a return on equity of 12.75%, guaranteed. So that if it falls below that, they have the right to go to the Fair Trading Commission and ask for rates to make it that. Investment in energy is safe, it is sound, but even more important than that, it is critical to our own future. That's why we should actually do it. So we are confident that through Co-op Energy, we can actually solve this problem of no returns on bank deposits, but that the credit unions have been forced to suffer for many times, for many years. Here's the crux of the matter. At Section 34A of the Cooperative Societies Act, the law says very clearly that the funds of a society, including the reserves, may be deposited either in a bank that is licensed under the Financial Institutions Act or in a society that is registered under the Cooperative Societies Act. Now, the problem we had is that we did not have a society registered under the Cooperative Societies Act with the level of investment income that could pay reasonable deposits on the kind of deposits that the movement kind of managed. That was changed with the creation of Co-op Energy. And over the last 3 years, Co-op Energy has put itself in a position where that Section A, Item 2, is now available to the movement. So societies now have the option of investing, of depositing, not only in the banks, but also in a society owned by the movement that is able to pay fairly significant returns on their investment. Of course, you know that as a member of the Co-op Energy, over and above the interest that's paid at the end of the year, at the annual general meeting, we are also able to declare dividends, patronage refund. So the interest is the bare minimum that you will get back. We continue to have challenges with investments, as you see in Section B, where there's still fairly stringent controls on those. But in terms of deposits, the funds, the working funds deposited in the bank, that situation has now been addressed by the movement with the creation and the maturity of Co-op Energy. I basically said that just now, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time on that slide. In summary then, very, very quickly, the national, and this is a radical thing that we are into in Barbados. We are all into it. It's not some and not others. It's technically feasible and doable. Co-op Energy will be investing in the future because it is not only profitable and sound and logical, but the truth is, as a country, we have no choice. And the people will be in it whether you like it or not. So we have taken the decision to represent the interests of the people and make sure, instead of sitting back and hoping for the best, to get involved and play a part in making sure that it works out for the best. This can be done successfully, but only if done professionally and done together. Thank you for giving me the chance to make that presentation. I have a couple of things to say about the rate case, but rather than complicate things, I will stop at this point if you don't mind, and then just a 5-minute session in between when, if there are no questions, I will just give you an update on the rate case and then we can close off. If you don't mind, Master Ceremonies Chairman.
Trying to unmute there quickly. That is more than fine, Lieutenant Colonel. Thank you very much for that. Very, very insightful and very impactful. You took us all around the world as it relates to renewable energy. And, you know, clearly, you know, just from what you're saying, you know, they really does appear that there is a lot of opportunity. So thank you very much for a lot of that food for thought. And hopefully, you know, the word will spread and, you know, we can get, well, our members and I guess the wider Barbadian public to really, you know, kind of give investment in renewable energy, you know, a chance. Before we go into our question and answer series, again, anytime I am in front of people, I think is a great opportunity just to let you know, for those of you who are members, for those of you who maybe are thinking about become members, and, you know, for our friends and colleagues who are on the call, just a little bit about what we're doing as a credit union. So before we go into the formal Q&A, I'm going to call on one of my team members, Sister Lisa Collymore. She is the branch manager at our Bridgetown location, and she's going to give you a very quick update on our green financing options. So over to you, Lisa.
Hi, good evening, everybody. All right, so I just wanted to share a little bit with you as it relates to the products and services that we offer surrounding the green financing. So currently we offer loans for electric and hybrid vehicles, as well as loans to assist with purchasing and installing the solar panels. The loans are offered at very competitive rates. I will look at the vehicle loans first, and then we will go on to the solar panels. So the vehicle loans, they go up to a maximum of $200,000. And they're for a period of 10 years. This, however, will be dependent on the age of the vehicle. So for example, if the vehicle is 2 years old, you will receive a term of 8 years. So basically at the end of the life of the loan, the vehicle will be a 10-year-old vehicle at that time. The requirements for the vehicle loan would be for those persons who are employed, it'll be 2 months pay slips along with a job letter, 2 picture IDs, the insurance quotation and valuation on the vehicle. And those 2 picture IDs, one of those documents would be your driver's license.
Process to make a nuclear after this exercise. All parties.
Thank you, Valerie. All right. And for self-employed persons who are seeking to obtain those types of loans, you would need to supply us with your bank statements and our financial statements for at least 1 to 2 years, along with a business plan. Okay, and on to the green loans to assist with the purchasing of the solar panels. Those loans can go up to, so partially unsecured, those can go up to $35,000, and we require a cash deposit of 15%. Anything over the 35,000, we would require some form of collateral. The collateral can be cash, it can be a vehicle, it can be a cash surrender value on your insurance policy, and it can also be property, depending on the amount you're looking to obtain. I know persons may want to have the solar farm or such like. So those particular loans, which would be fully secured, those can go up to a maximum of $650,000, and the requirements for those will be the same in terms of the job letter, the 2 months pay slips, the picture IDs, and in those cases you would provide the quotation from the company that you're purchasing the panels from, and depending on the security you're using, you would provide the valuation for the particular security. So for instance, if you're using the cash surrender value on your insurance policy, you will provide us with the policy statement from the relevant insurance company. So that is it from me. I hope everyone has an enjoyable night, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So we are now at that point of the evening where it is now time to hear from you. Lieutenant Colonel Brown gave us a headful, and I'm sure you must have questions. I see one hand raised. So Mr. Brotherstrawn, if you can go ahead and unmute, and with that, we're going to follow your question with a question from Brother Julian Welch. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, and congratulations, Trevor, again. This is several times now I'm joining your webinars, and I'm always very enlightened. We go back a long way, but that's why I'm comfortable asking you this question, because you've always been a radical thinker. Part of the mandate, I believe, from any progressive government is to save the citizens of the country from themselves from time to time. Don't you think that it is time that a government, especially one with such a huge majority, consider implementing either a tax or a levy where per person's salary, even just 1%, as a means of investment into something like co-op energy, which eventually does belong still to the individual? Is that too radical a thought? Over to you, Trevor.
Yeah, I think that's a bridge too far, even for me, David. The truth is, don't forget, as a matter of course, government collect taxes to run the country, and they collect these taxes from the citizens of the country. And I think the expectation is that when you do a budget, this includes investing on behalf of the citizens of the country. It has always been my position that anything that is owned by government is actually owned by the citizens of the country. So therefore, I don't automatically think of a situation where over and above that, you ask government to actually get people now to pool funds separately to invest. I actually see that more as a role for something like the cooperative movement, or for groups of individuals, or for individuals themselves who can afford it for their own group reasons. But from a country point of view, I think it is government's responsibility. And I have to say that on behalf of this particular government, and the previous one, because the truth is the Barbados National Energy Policy actually started before. When it comes to energy, the policy, you cannot fault the Barbados National Energy Policy. The problem we have with energy in Barbados is not to do with the policy or government or even investment. The problem is to do with the structure of the various entities that are required to make it work. And they need to be sorted out. And I could be very fluent on why they're not working. And I guess I have been. That's basically the reason what myself and Brother Haynes, Ali Haynes, as interveners, that's what we've been doing as representing the movement in the rare case. So just to cut a long story short, I understand the point you're making, but my expectation is that this is something that government should be doing as a matter of course, using the taxes that are paid and the income that comes from investments that belong to Barbadians to make sure that Barbadians are enfranchised, that these things that are state-owned actually belong to Barbadians. And to the extent that that is not happening, I think we need to talk about that. But I'm not sure you get a lot of votes, a lot of support for an additional tax to do that now, David.
Thank you very much, Trevor. We're going to now move to Brother Julian Welch. Please go ahead and unmute, and if you feel brave enough, you can also go on camera.
All right, good evening, folks. Can you hear me?
Can hear you loud and clear.
Great. So I think maybe Lieutenant Colonel Brown, you may plan to touch on this later on, but I'm curious to hear your view on the implications of the recent communique that BLPC has issued to the market regarding the grid instability issue. So I want to hear your take on that and the potential impact that would have on investor confidence in RE going forward. The other thing I would like to hear you speak on, I have heard you speak previously in a more cautionary approach, which I guess is guiding us to this sort of group investment dynamic. But you would have alluded to not so favorable RE investment situations like Spain. I remember you mentioned Spain, and there might be others as well. Now, I want to understand then, following on from that, what do you see as the main risk in the short, intermediate, and long term in Barbados in this model that we're projecting going forward? And finally, I want to say that having had some curiosity in RE in Barbados, I think I still have a lot of research to do personally so that I'm comfortable, certainly as comfortable as you are. But I am at the point now where I've noticed certain things and I've become a bit cynical because I realized that with this grid stability issue coming out of left field early in our strategic rollout of the RE plans, I'm thinking that, is this a case where the first mover, certain individuals or certain people will have first mover advantage in this RE investment process, or certainly will it favor huge industrial type investment investors? I hope you understand the question. Is it that only the first movers, such as those who had ready access to lands and capital, as we've seen in Barbados, will be able to eke out a reasonable return on investment because they have been able to pounce on this opportunity? And will it likely only favor, in addition to those early movers, large industrial type investors, such as the Rubis investment or people who are looking to invest upwards of, say, 5 megawatts?
Okay. Those are actually, but I think you're actually trying to set me up, and you've done it actually quite well, because I think you know that I like to talk about this sort of thing. So let me see if I can start at the top from the grid instability issue. The truth is, we have been talking about this from the very beginning. It is not even that complicated. The problem is there have been significant strides in photovoltaic systems. The panels have become really efficient, much cheaper. And as you know, I mean, there's basically you buy a panel, bolt it on your roof, run to Western, and leave it there for 20 years. I mean, that's so easy that it is not even funny. And therefore, there's a natural inclination. Everybody wants to do that. Now, the problem is when you think about it, that's not what electricity is. You know, when what you pay in light and power for is not when the sun is shining, you get some electricity. When the sun goes away, it goes away. Like, the quality, the service that you get to your house is far more complicated than that. You actually have on-demand power whenever you want it. When you choose the switch, up to 200 amps or 15 kilowatt hour or whatever is available to you on demand. Now that is a far different quality of service than what comes out of a solar panel. Unfortunately, and I think you didn't ask me a question, you actually answered it. By rushing into this upfront and marketing PV as the equivalent of what comes into your meter, some people were able to convince the rate setters that their rate should be comparable to what you actually pay light and power for on-demand power packages at your house. They're two completely different things. What has happened then is that, and you call them early movers, when I became so upset at some point from the engineering point of view that I tossed out the word. Well, I tossed out the word I probably should not have tossed out because even my committee wasn't too happy about that when they started talking about Ponzi. But you created a situation where people were able to rush in with these artificially high rates, grab, and if you understand how a fossil electric system works, there is a degree of flexibility. Because, I mean, think about it. The people at Spring Garden don't know when you're going to turn on a fridge or something else in Lucy or somebody in Philip and go and plug in something big. So the system has enough flexibility that when you do that, the frequency is actually going to drop a little bit. They notice the drop at Spring Garden and the machines speed up. You know, obviously this happens automatically, but the system has some reaction in it. That reactivity covers about maybe 8 to 10% of the system. So for up to 8 or 10%, you can have this level of variability. When you put PV panels on, the PV panels take up that variability. So panels come in and we go out and the system think of these people switching on and off things and adjust accordingly. After you get about 9, 10%, that isn't going to work anymore. And what has happened now is that the FTC has had to make an adjustment more towards what the actual value of PV energy is in the electricity market. This was obvious from the very beginning. If we had done a plan, somebody had sat down and said, let's see how this is going to work. This is what we're going to need. There's how much PV, there's how much wind, this is how much bio. From the time they wrote that on a piece of paper, it would have been obvious that this mediation letter that Light and Power sent in November last year was going to be inevitable. And this could have been addressed long before we had the situation of early movers who are locked into rates for the next 20 years that will be subsidized by people who actually pay for electricity from their meter. Because the actual cost of generating energy from solar panels was overrated at the beginning. So to answer another question that you asked, I really want to touch a little bit about. This is why when in speaking about it from Co-op Energy, our inclination has been to encourage Co-op members to let us do this together. Let us get together. Let's make sure we have engineers on board and architects on board and bankers on board, people who actually understand the complexities before we rush and put our money into anything. What you'll find is that when we invest in something, we have tested it and we know it's going to work. Everybody should invest in energy, but it is not simple. It is not a simple straight. I think I was hoping that at the first part of my presentation was designed to get you to understand that while this is doable, while we have to do it for our own future survival of our children and grandchildren, it is complicated. but we can do it together with the correct expertise. This idea of having a whole bunch of people running around and taking their savings off the bank, this is what happened in Spain. And again, you can go and research that. You don't have to take my word for it. Just go and look renewable energy in Spain and see what happened. Significant bankruptcies because people went and borrowed money from the banks and from the credit unions and invested in large systems. And then when it became clear that there was a limit to what level of variable PV can go on the grid, these people sitting with large multi-megawatt systems. The truth is that the company actually did not have the money to pay them, which is why you will find that companies will be constantly going for rate increases. Because to get money to pay those people who have been early movers. And what happened in Spain is that to solve the problem, the government actually introduced something called a sun tax. So to cover the difference, they actually tax anybody who put a panel on their roof, had to pay a tax per panel. And that actually, well, read about it. That's a very, very interesting read. The point is, this can be done. It needs to be done. The government's policy is brilliant, but it is too complicated for individual people that may not understand all the complexities to be straining the brain. And even if you do it right, you're done 2 years from now. The difference between the utility and the individual independent power producer is that the utility, in the laws of Barbados says that the utility will not lose money. If the costs go up, there will be a rate hearing and everybody will pay a little bit more so the utility will continue to make a profit. If you are a private producer and you're going to borrow your money and you do all that, everything may start really well, price go up, or somebody can't pay, or there's a problem, you have no protection. The losses are at you. What we're saying from an individual point of view, we have been encouraging our members, get involved in energy, but let's do it together through the co-op. And through the co-op, we actually want to do it through the utility because that is the legal, formal, it is the historical way that this thing has worked. We want that to work right. We don't want to compete with them either. We want to be part of what they do. So that is what we are representing on behalf of all Barbadians, especially those people in the cooperative movement. So the questions that you asked almost make it unnecessary for me to do the presentation on the rate hearing because basically that has been the point that we've been taking, myself and Brother Haynes, in representing the movement at the hearing.
Thank you very much for that. We're now going to move on to Sister Claire Millington. The floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. In light of the recent pronouncement by the Light and Power, there's been a reduction in the rate. So that makes it, does that reduce the attractiveness of investment in solar, the rate now that is now being offered to the second string for investors?
Unfortunately, it does. And they're two separate things. Okay, so the mitigation measures that Light and Power issued, this is a technical, they had no choice. Technically, they had to do that. Our concern with that is that they should have said that 2 or 3 years ago. But they've reached the point, I think they were under all kind of pressure to try to make this thing work. You know, we had all kind of pronouncements being made about how this is so easy, just go and borrow the money and invest in panels. And I think that politically, probably, Light Power didn't want to be the one to say, well, that isn't going to work. But trust me, the people at Light Power are brilliant. I work with some of those people. They have outstanding engineers who understand this down to a T. They could have and should have said this 2 or 3 years ago. What they said in November last year had to be said. The system can no longer tolerate any more instability. What the FTC did is also inevitable. This should also have been foreseen 4 or 5 years down the road by proper planning. What they have recognized by reducing the rate is that the rate that they initially gave to attract investment is not sustainable. Now, the problem with doing it this way is that if you were interested in investing in, say, a solar farm, and you did all your preliminary projections based on the rate that has been knocking around for the last 2 years, and suddenly you hear there's going to be a new rate, which is less, and at the same time, you now have to invest in batteries, which by the way cost more than twice what the solar panels cost.
Oh my goodness.
So you have to spend more money to invest, and the rate has gone down, that tends to be a disincentive. Now, the actual reality is that the new rates that the FTC has issued and the mitigation measures that Nepal has put in place are necessary and should have been. So now what we should have had is a situation where upfront, people who want to invest in PV understood these and invested with that in mind. So you would have done your business plan on a much longer term using realistic figures, what PV energy into the grid is actually worth. And they can tell you it is not worth what it was initially valued at, because it's not comparable with what you actually pay lane for.
So is it still an attractive investment then?
Oh, yes, it is. It still is, but it has to be seen as a long term, and it is not going to make you a millionaire in 2 or 3 months. But it is a solid long-term investment that is even more important because you're investing in your future and in your children's future. Without energy going forward, Barbados is in deep trouble. So we need the investment. PV gives you a chance. Investing in the PV farm, for example, is a good long-term investment that is going to actually make you some money. It's not going to make you a millionaire in a month or two, as some people have been projecting, but it will make you maybe a thousandaire or $100 in a couple of years. But there's nothing wrong with that, because at the same time, you are providing a secure energy future for your children and your grandchildren and for yourself. So I think the point that you're making is that it's unfortunately it will turn off some investors because they are now comparing it with what was offered up front. That, to me, is the problem. If everything had been laid up front, people would have invested the same way, but just with more modest expectations, which is the correct approach that should have been taken.
Oh, I see. Just one other question. You keep mentioning co-op energy. And is this a? Could you explain a bit about how that works?
Thank you for that, because they probably should do that, and I'm sure that my other board members would be vexing me if I didn't do that. So, when the Barbados National Energy Policy was launched by government in 2019, the Ministry of Energy held a number of stakeholder sessions. They got all the interested people together and said, here's what the government wants to do. We want you to know, we want to see what you think, and which was really great. And they invited the credit unions. I was there from the Engineers Association and all the various players, all the interested people and all that. When it became, what we realized then is that there are a number of major international bodies who were interested in making significant investments in this energy thing in Barbados. I mean, that rings a bell. And therefore, the members of the credit, particularly people like Orl Doyle and Holly Haynes, during the sessions, we raised concerns about the extent to which individual Barbadians could be included in this. And the fact is that the government had, in their policy, stated that they wanted ordinary Barbadians to be involved, but they had not outlined a mechanism for doing it. So what the cooperative people in the meeting tended to do was, what they did then was to say, but the way to do this is through cooperatives. And coming out of those, actually, there was buy-in from everyone. The ministry agreed, the FTC people agreed. In fact, at our first meeting, the FTC did the presentation, the minister did the presentation. Everybody was actually on board, and everybody saw the value of the movement doing it. Now, when you look at the movement had a legal weakness when it comes to investments. And anyone who is on the board would be able to tell you that we've always had this problem where if you want to invest in productive enterprises, there were legal restrictions. We were able to set up Co-op Energy to get around that problem, because Co-op Energy is a productive co-op, or a production co-op, energy production, energy investment. So the Co-op Energy, it was actually created by the collection, all of the co-ops together, but it includes all Barbadians to solve that problem. So it is a cooperative focus on energy investments put together by the cooperative movement to represent the interests of the cooperative movement in energy investments going forward in Barbados. And that goes from individual people who may want to be involved, and we will help with that, including in providing technical assistance and all that. We actually have a relationship with the Engineers Association and people who actually understand these issues, so that even if an individual credit union or co-op or individual credit union member is interested in a major investment, we will have the expertise to be able to offer advice and assistance and guidance and things. So that is what Co-op Energy is all about. It was created by the movement to facilitate the interests of the movement and cooperative members generally in the energy sphere of Barbados. And that's why we got involved in the rate case, for example, because then obviously once the rate case came up, it was an opportunity for us to understand how the whole thing works, what the ins and outs were, and that is where we actually got involved. And that has been a life lesson for us, quite frankly.
Okay, so if an individual member, you may be perplexed about the whole scenario, Co-op Energy then would be an agency that an individual could come to for advice.
More than come to, you can join. It just costs $100 to join. So you could join and then you become a full part and all our resources is at your disposal. So if you were interested in a major investment, for example, and you came and you were a member of Co-op Energy, you came to us, obviously, we will give you to the best of our ability the advice so that you're on the right track and guide you to the kind of expertise you need, the kind of technical support that you will actually need to make sure, and the kind of planning to make sure that your investment is going to be successful, planning upfront. So you know what you're getting into, and we can tell you how it is going to work out and what dangers you can expect.
Oh, very good, very good.
Right,
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Then moving on to Brother Ricardo Strickland.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me well?
Can hear you well.
Yes, I think your response just now clarified one of the questions I was going to ask, but I'll ask it nevertheless. Co-op Energy is not involved in the ownership of PV systems. You are more in you're more of a consultant or play an advisory role to those who want to invest. But you're not a shareholder in any projects per se.
Not yet.
Okay.
Well, that's not strictly true. Yes, we are, but the truth is, the sky is the limit in terms of our involvement. When we set together the objectives and when we sat down with the registrar to decide what Co-op Energy could do, we made it as broad as possible, and for a reason. The truth is, it was not then, and it still is not absolutely clear how this energy future of Barbados is going to pan out. And we didn't want to tie ourselves into any. So if you look at our objectives, they're actually quite broad. So we can and probably will eventually end up owning some PV systems. But our current preference is to be part of a national utility that owns everything and that can bring you economies of scale to bear. Let me make a quick industry fact. The cost per unit of electricity produced by an individual owned little solar farm or panels on your roof is twice as much as the cost of electricity produced by a national utility. It actually costs significantly more per unit to produce electricity in these discrete distributed systems compared for a number of reasons. I mean, you can actually see that it is far more efficient to do it altogether. So from the country overall national point of view, a one altogether approach is the exact requirement for success. But over and above that, there's nothing wrong with a particular individual who have the knowledge, the resources, the tenacity to actually invest in a system, make it work, get some returns on it. That is actually great. But in terms of solving Barbados's future energy problems and moving to sustainability, that is a problem that needs to be solved at the utility level.
Okay.
I don't know if
Yeah,
but the answer to your question,
yeah,
yes,
I understand. All right, the main point I wanted to bring up though was relative to the same letter you referred to that came out in November last year.
Right.
And I'm aware that some applicants would have received correspondence through via their ELPA application.
Right.
That if they wanted to proceed with their project now, they would have to invest in battery storage that is 4 times the size of the system. Or you can wait until Light and Power acquire, I believe it's around 45 megawatts of battery storage that they anticipate around the end of this year. Now, the question I have, or questions I have, one is the 45 megawatts that that is referenced in that correspondence going to be enough for applicants who might opt to forego the project now and probably look at 2024? Will that 45 megawatts be enough to cater for all of those applicants that are in the system right now? Second, right. The second question is the whole concept of the renewable energy projects is that there's a feed-in tariff for the energy produced by the PV system or windmill, whatever. So your revenue is somewhat predictable as long, in the case of solar, as long as the sun continues to shine based on the assumptions made, your revenue is relatively predictable over the life of the 20-year license.
Right.
However, the returns are going to be based on the costs of the project, as well as the maintenance during that 20-year period. So if persons, if applicants are now required, some, maybe all, have to invest in battery storage, is it fair to assume that there's going to be a feed-in tariff for investing in battery storage as well, that is going to cover the cost of battery storage? Because when we talk about battery storage, and speaking to some persons, they seem to be looking more at the upfront costs. However, manufacturers of the batteries are offering a 5-year warranty. They're suggesting the batteries have an 8 to 10-year life. So it means that you're going to have to replace those batteries probably in 8 to 10 years. And God forbid, if you have to replace them directly after the warranty is over, then all of that cost is likely at yourself. So you're basically putting some applicants in a position, when I say you, I'm not meaning you per se, but the
Yes.
whole thing, you're putting applicants in a position where they are going to, may have to invest in battery storage when they have little or no knowledge about electricity and electricity storage up to that point. And wouldn't it be best for Light and Power be the entity to assume that risk, given that they're the experts in that area, so that the independent producers can focus on investing in the systems? So I can pause there. I know it's not a mouthful, but I hope you've captured the essence of all that I was saying.
You know that that's not easy challenge at my age trying to remember all these questions, but they're also pertinent questions. Okay, so first of all, the 45 megawatt. I'm not sure where you got that. I think Light and Power may have applied for licenses to install that amount of megawatts, but the estimated storage required, and this is just estimated now, and so I can tell you as an engineer myself, I put zero store to these numbers. I will believe these numbers when I see a plan overall that has been tested, that tells me what is where I can see the calculations that say what storage is needed. This is not things that can be guessed. These are things that have to be calculated. You have to look at all the various eventualities and then you decide. But the number being tossed about now is 200 megawatt of storage. That's actually what the estimated requirement will be. I put it to you that it's going to be more than that, but that's a different story altogether. Also, I think that I don't recall, I may be wrong, speaking of the correction, but I thought that the letter that they sent required 4 hours of storage. So in other words, depending on whatever size system you have, you need to be able to store 4 hours of that energy in order to be connected to the grid. So then the actual amount of batteries would depend on the size of system that you wanted to put in place. Now you asked about the fit and all that. That's the correct little thing. The truth is, if you install a PV system, almost everything is predictable. I mean, the truth is, the cost, you know the cost because you're going to buy, most of the cost is upfront, capital cost of the panels and installation and things like that. the maintenance is actually, it's not a lot. I mean, the panels should really last 15 to 20 years quite easily. The problem with the panels is not really that they will wear out and need maintenance. The problem is that they will become redundant, because certainly my experience has been that you buy a first class panel that was really, really great 5 years ago, and then 2 years down the road, somebody have a panel that costs a quarter of that and produce 10 times the thing and take up less space. So you actually change them, not because they're not working, but because they're completely new systems on the market, far more efficient. And also the whole question of the batteries. Now, and this is my honest opinion, I really don't know how else to put it. My whole life, this is where they operate, so I can have to tell you the truth. I think that whole battery thing is just nonsense. I put that in the same league as when I heard about PV up front, being able to just put PV up and that's going to solve the whole problem. Anybody who have had any dealings with batteries, especially these modern lithium batteries, lithium iron and lithium iron and that sort of thing. First of all, these batteries last 8 to 10 years, as you say. That's correct. The investment is substantial. Electric utility system is designed for 30, 40, 50, 60 years life. If you design a system where you're going to be rotating a capital asset every 8 to 10 years, but the cost, I mean, I can't imagine what the cost would be like. They are far more lifetime efficient storage mechanisms, like pump storage, for example. I mean, there's hydrogen. Batteries are ideal for mobile applications. If you're going to have a car driving around, obviously you need batteries. So there's a space for batteries. But the idea that batteries could fill the role on a large scale for a national electricity grid, I would need to see the calculations, and I would need to see a plan in place that shows me how that makes financial sense. Not with something that, and I've had a lot of experience with batteries personally, and the truth is, even these modern batteries they're complex, and they only need 1 or 2 cells to start to give you trouble, and the whole thing is a mess. This is not something that an individual can manage. So when Lightning Power says that you can either put in 4 hours of your own storage or wait on us, that is really, what do you call it, catch-22. The only option is for the utility or some large-scale, knowledgeable level of experience, expertise to do something like that. This is not something for individual people to do in their backyard. And in any case, getting planning permission to even put batteries around the places, you can't just put batteries anywhere in Barbados. That whole thing is too complicated to be treated off the cuff. So my attitude to that is the same I had when we first heard people talking about PV and encouraging people to go and invest as much as they can in PV before to plan. Batteries, storage is critical, and it is a first-class investment, and there is going to be value in investing in storage. But by default, that does not mean batteries.
Thank you.
Understood.
Okay, so.
I don't see any other hands raised at this point. So just gonna trigger if anybody has any additional questions at this time.
Or I can just very briefly talk about the rate case.
Sorry, we just had a hand go up. So I'll let Brother Welch go again, and then I'll ask you to talk about the rate case, please. Go ahead, Brother Welch.
Thank you very much. I wouldn't delay this discussion any further, but I wanted to just add that my expectation on the batteries situation was that, you know, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. And I would imagine that if an investor was asked to foot the cost of providing batteries, then the rate pertaining to that feed should be high enough to cover the investment. So that's, I don't think it's I think you know, that's how I look at it, and I think that's
you're right. No, but you're right, and actually I think the intent is that there will be a rate for storage, so that so if for example someone was to go ahead and install the PV system and install the necessary storage to satisfy the power requirement, the expectation is that they will get a return on the PV units generated by the PV, and somehow on the the work being done by the batteries. One problem is that they have to work out how they will pay for that. I mean, do you pay for how much energy goes in, or how much comes out, or how much it keeps, or how long it keeps it? And I think that's one of the problems that the FTC have. You're trying to establish, well, how do you decide to pay for people who install batteries? Even the batteries that Lightning Power have installed already for the last couple of years, there's a major dispute going on. And if you read their last response to the rate case, one of the things they're complaining about is the way that they're being paid for that. They don't think that the way that it is that they're being reimbursed for having installed that asset is adequate. How you pay for how batteries work, how they're used, and how you reimburse for that is fairly complex, and it has not yet been resolved. That's one of the issues too. But you're right that there is intended to be a reimbursement for having batteries.
And as I had this query when you mentioned that you were going to be part of, or the cooperative part of the National Energy Authority.
No, that is what we are proposing.
That's the proposal.
Okay.
Right. So the proposal, right? Then wouldn't it represent a conflict of interest to also be an investor?
Not sure. Why would that?
Well,
in fact, it is by being an investor that you become a shareholder.
You're part of the authority. Okay.
That's right. Yes. So those four persons, the four groups that we identified as part of the authority are the four investors: the general public 20%, the co-op 20%, the American Caribbean Limited 40%, and so those are the key. So it is by being an investor. So what it would mean is that Co-op Energy would have to find, I don't know, $50–60 million to invest in the energy authority. So you would be an investor.
Copy.
Right.
So
Okay, well,
I was gonna let you close off by going through the implications. I think a lot of people are eager to hear your perspectives on that.
Okay, well, maybe let me share the slide, because I'll probably I tend to talk too much if I don't share my slide. So let me share the slide. Okay, so I mentioned this already, so I'm not going to. So that the company is a regulated public utility that it was created. It belongs to Barbados. It was created for the good, and actually the intent is that they're supposed to maintain the infrastructure, prepare for undertake needed. In other words, make sure that the electricity grid is ready, is fit for purpose, ready for the future and to serve the future needs, and then obviously to operate it on a day-to-day basis. In exchange, the licensee or the franchise holder gets exclusive right to public sales. As you know, no one else in Barbados can sell electricity except the utility. They get a guaranteed rate of return on money that they invest to make the utility work. And reasonable returns are paid on people who make investments in the utility. All this is set by the Fair Trading Commission, the FTC, who acts as the referee and the regulator. This, as I think I made the point that this has not been working. And by the fact that we only made 4%, that things taking so long that a rate case could take, this is going into 2 years now, like to decide on rates and getting more complicated. Misinformation going to the public about the whole question of PVs and batteries and all that, and actually impacting on investor confidence. These are issues that we have serious concerns about. So when we Co-op Energy took a decision, and actually we had some requests from members, ordinary members requested us that we become interveners to represent the interests of the ordinary members, especially the cooperatives. It was revealing when we became involved, we were accepted as interveners, and just like typical credit union and cooperative people, what we did is we took a financial look at the operation. So like Paul was saying, well, we're losing money, we need to get an increase, we need I think they were asking for the 11.9% increase and all that. Basically what we did was to take their financial statements since the last rate case and do the kind of summary that credit unions do every year. You look at the delinquency rate and how things change over the year and all the loan to debt equity ratio, things like that. Here, to cut a long story short, is what we found. So the last rate hearing was in 2010. So we have audited financial figures from 2009 to 2021. In that period, Barbadians paid $3.6 billion or $289 million per year. This is just in fuel charges alone. This is just for fuel. The electricity bills, $2.55 billion in that 11-year period, or $196 million per year. The total investment made in the utility by shareholders, and there's only one shareholder, that's Emir. In this whole period, $0, not a single cent. The total expenditure to operate the system and to run, $1.9 billion or $148 million a year, leaving net income of $635 million for the period, or $48 million per year. Now, this is the part that bothers us. Bothered then, past tense, and bothers present tense. 21% of net revenue, or 86% of net income, or $538 million of that $635 million income was paid as dividends to the shareholder, leaving $97 million for that 11-year period for the operations, or $7 million a year. Our simple question is, in these circumstances, how do you come and tell me that you need a 12% increase when you are paying this level of dividend? And I want you to understand that the shareholding, and this is all from their financial statement. So if I'm wrong, the financial statement is wrong. $200 million in shares. So you have $200 million invested, and in an 11-year period, you have returns of $538 million. And you're telling me that as a result, you want to get an increase. We are still trying to come to grips with that request. So the questions that we have and that we have been asking are questions like these. When we look at the act sets clear a requirement for a number of principles that everybody can read and see. This is how you will arrive at rates. It can't be that you take out whatever you want up front as dividends, and then what is left have to make do, or you have to get an increase. So we want to see what are those guiding principles, and we have not been able to find them. Again, as I said just now, we asked, how can a company that has paid more than 24% on dividends on shares now be claiming that they have financial hardship and need an interim rate increase? We asked why, when the last rates were given in 2011, the company promised and agreed that once they get the rates, new generating plant would have been installed. Now, let me explain to you the importance of this. New generating plant means increased efficiency. Efficiency is how you convert the fuel into electricity. The old plants, those old engines from 1976 operate at 1976 standard. It is possible to buy new plant, 21st century plant, significantly more efficient. Cut a long story short, as a result of not installing plant as they had agreed, we estimate that over the 11-year period, $1.4 billion. Remember I told you how much we paid in fuel costs? $1.4 billion of that was extra because we continue to use the old inefficient plant, when the funds to install a new plant was actually provided as requested in the hearing. And then there's the question of a self-insurance fund, which, well, I don't even want to talk too much about that because it upsets me. But we've been asking some questions about how that was actually handled, and we have not yet received the answers. We know that the FTC has also been asking questions, but even so, we still think that this is a matter that needs to be properly investigated. And then the last item that completely kerfuffles us, everybody knows that in 2019, government took a decision to drop tax rates significantly, resulting in a reduced tax expense to the company. These taxes are actually paid when you pay your electricity bill. Part of that bill is to cover those taxes. So when government reduces those taxes, what should happen is that your bill should have reduced by that amount, or at least those funds should have been accrued to the company as reserves for the company. Instead, when we check their financial statements, what we found is that these were paid as dividends to shareholders. Makes no sense whatsoever to us. And we intend to ask about this until we get answers that actually make sense. So as we said, 16 months after the application, this is still to be completed. Nothing in the case, even if when the case is resolved, I want to make it clear to you that this is not going to impact the new need for the Barbados National Energy. It has nothing to do with the need going forward. Everything about the case is about the historical fossil plan. There was the company did not present a plan going forward for renewable energy. Nothing was said about that. We think that far from being in a financial strain, the company actually paid better dividends since 2010 than any other company we could find, except oil companies, and for obvious reasons. And then we also had problems with the interim rates because we have not been able to find anywhere in the act, and there are laws that actually govern how this whole utility is supposed to operate. We have found nothing in the act that gives the authority to give something called interim rates. We have no idea what they were. To deal with this, we actually submitted motions. A motion is just a formal request for a hearing so that we can ask questions and get answers. We filed 2 motions in October 2022. One asking about dividends and how the dividends were calculated, and one requesting clarification on the self-insurance fund. We have not, so far we have been totally ignored. That's the honest truth. When FTC issued their decision on the 25th of February, you would have heard the decision. There were some aspects of the decision that the company obviously did not like. They submitted a motion requesting that be reviewed. They submitted a motion on the 7th of March, 2023. And on the 16th of March, they received notification that their hearing will be held, their motion will be held, and steps were put in place to hear this. But our motion have not been held. No, I can tell you, my brother intervener, Brother Haynes, and myself, and the board of Co-op Energy, and the other co-ops that we have spoken to, have said to us that they fully support our pushing this wherever it needs to go to get clarity. We're actually talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. And on behalf of our members, it is our intent to take this to where it is properly and clearly resolved. So unless we get clear directions to the contrary from the movement, that is our instruction. These are our instructions so far. That basically is it, the case. As you know, what's going to happen now, we're going to have this motion that Lightning Power brought. There's going to be a lot of back and forth. My prediction is that it will be turned down, and then we can just go through back and forth motions, delaying the inevitable even further. We are asking that this thing be closed so that we can actually move forward with the critical task of implementing the government's national energy policy in the interest of Barbados collectively. And I will stop at that point. If there are any brief questions on that, I will deal with that, but I know that I'm aware that I've kind of exhausted my time. Thank you all very, very much.
See that Brother Strickland's hand flew up so quickly.
I have two quick questions. One is, are there any local shareholders in Emira?
In Emira? Oh, yes.
In BLMP? In BLMP?
No, the only shareholder in BLMP is Emira Caribbean Limited. Okay. And then Emira Caribbean Limited, they are owned by Emira Canada, whatever their real name is, Emira Inc.
Okay.
But there may be Barbadians, well, there are Barbadians who may have shares in Emira Canada. Mm-hmm. And there may be people who have shares in Emira. I'm not aware of anybody having shares in Emira Caribbean Limited besides Emira, but okay. I don't have all that information. But the only people who have shares in Lightning Power is Emira Caribbean Limited.
And my final contribution, usually a Barbadian, Barbados complain a lot, have complained a lot over the years about Trinidad ownership. They fail to, and this has been happening quietly, but the Canadians control a significant part of the Barbadian economy. And nobody seems to see that, and they have a lot of influence here. So, you know, we should start worrying about Trinidad and consider what is owned by Canadians.
Well,
There's
but, you know,
significant investments here.
no,
And
but
control over the economy too.
I would put it differently. The truth is, if I was Canadian and I had the opportunity to make $200 million investment and make over $1 billion in returns over a 10-year period, I would do it. So I cannot blame them for doing it. What we need to do is to make sure that wherever possible, Barbadians take the opportunity to make those kind of investments. My beef is that a cooperative movement with the cooperative movement in Barbados is 6 times the size of Lightning Power in asset. The biggest credit union in Barbados can actually buy Lightning Power in terms of what they can afford. But we, instead of making those kind of investments and making the kind of returns that I put to you, not necessarily $500 million a year, because that is really excessive. But even if you only made the 12.75% that is allowed by the FTC, that is significantly better than we are actually making now on the monies that we have in the bank. So rather than worry about what other people do, because you can't blame them for taking advantage, but we need to get our act together. And I am proud to say that in 2019, the leaders of the movement took the decision in putting core energy together to take steps to do that. And in 2023 now, I can tell you that we are in a position to do that. I neglected to mention that one of the you were asked about investments in solar energy. We were concerned about the PV and all that, but what we have invested in is electric and hybrid vehicles. So we have invested in a company. So we actually bring in vehicles now. We started on a fairly small scale, but we intend to ramp that up. And we did that because it is clear that that is the direction we are going as a country. And it is something that when we did these studies, it actually makes absolute sense to be getting in that area, not only in bringing in, but also getting involved in battery technology and maintenance, because we know that batteries and the life of the batteries is a major concern. So we want to be able to help members when that time comes along that area too. So we've actually invested in that. And that has actually started out better than we actually thought, to be quite honest. But the point is, we have started growing, and we have some significant interest, as I said, in some state enterprises that actually will be critical to the ongoing future of Barbados anyhow. So it is a safe investment. So we, rather than worry about who is doing what, we have taken steps to make sure that Barbadians get the opportunity to benefit from similar investments in enterprises in Barbados.
Thank you very much for that, Lieutenant Colonel, because we're right now just going about 6 minutes past 8. So unfortunately, we can't take any more questions. But I want to do very quickly what I promised at the very beginning, and thank you for everybody who has stayed with us. And that is just to pose 2 very quick questions. And, you know, as first person to raise their hand after each question is asked will be, you know, given the option to answer and will win